Welcome to this channel, a space dedicated to making psychology, as I've discovered and explored it through my university studies and my own research, understandable and accessible to everyone. My goal is to present each concept accurately, relying on empirical research while making sure to remain accessible to all. All sources will be listed below each video, inviting you to delve deeper into the topics if you wish. The theme of our first episode, as indicated by the title of this podcast, is motivation as a scientifically studied phenomenon. The choice of this topic to launch the channel is not coincidental. Embarking on such a project requires a certain level of motivation, and what better way to start than by exploring this very concept that drives us to act. Let's start with a brief history. Like many concepts in psychology, we find roots in antiquity. Indeed, it was Plato who identified 3 levels of the soul. At the most fundamental biological level, the appetitive aspect encompasses physical needs and desires, such as hunger and sexual drives. In the social sphere, the competitive aspect integrates socially established norms, such as honor and shame. At the higher level, the calculative aspect enhances decision-making faculties, such as logic and choice. Centuries later, the complex tripartite vision of the soul was reduced to a dualism opposing the body and the mind. The body, described as irrational and impulsive, acts as a mechanical and passive agent, guided by biological necessities. In contrast, the mind is seen as rational, intelligent, and spiritual, an immaterial and active agent capable of will, illustrating its superiority and control over the body. Willpower, initially seen as the cornerstone of motivation by thinkers like Descartes, symbolized the inner strength controlling our desires and passions. This notion dominated for a long time, suggesting that understanding motivation was to understand willpower. However, despite centuries of reflection, willpower remained an elusive, complex, and ultimately inscrutable concept, revealing little about the true essence of motivation. Faced with the deadlock encountered with the concept of willpower, science turned towards more tangible and empirically verifiable explanations. Instinct, introduced by Darwin, marked a turning point, offering a biological perspective on our behavior. Instincts, unlike willpower, are rooted in our genetic heritage, motivating automatic and innate behaviors that promote adaptation to our environment. Then came the notion of drive, illustrated by Freud, which replaced instinct. Drives are seen as internal psychological forces generated by biological imbalances, such as hunger or thirst, pushing the individual to act to restore homeostasis. The drive theory was well received because it allowed predicting motivation. This theory, like those of willpower and instinct, was ultimately deemed too restrictive. This transition to a more functional and biologically anchored understanding of motivation marks a significant departure from abstract philosophical analysis to more scientific inquiry. Starting with Freud and his theory of drives, it was more about predicting. The cognitive revolution of the 1970s transformed the understanding of motivation, highlighting the importance of cognitive processes like thoughts and expectations in behavior. This period introduced 3 major changes: the prioritization of cognitive interpretations over traditional motivational concepts, an increased interest in internal mental processes, and a view of psychology more centered on the human than on the mechanical. Concurrently, the humanistic movement, with thinkers like Maslow, known for his hierarchy of needs, and Rogers, promoted a view of human beings as naturally active and in pursuit of growth, rejecting earlier mechanistic approaches. The most recent research now focuses on the motivations behind specific and very practical behaviors, like eating and eating disorders, marking a transition from the study of basic biological motivations to more complex and contextual questions. To understand motivation, it is necessary to address the issue of fundamental human needs. A need is defined by its essential nature for life. It is a condition necessary for growth, well-being, and life in general. The deficiency of our basic needs leads to disruptions, prompting the body to deploy defense mechanisms to compensate. These mechanisms highlight the essential dynamics of human motivation. demonstrating how our biological and physiological systems, our motivational states and our actions collaborate harmoniously to ensure balanced biological regulation. In the course of research on motivation, 3 needs have emerged and structured themselves. Firstly, physiological needs, an internal biological state coordinating brain, hormonal and organic functions to maintain bodily homeostasis and counter imbalances that could compromise growth, well-being, and survival. The sensation of thirst, hunger, or even sexual desire. Secondly, we have psychological and innate needs. These underlie a proactive impulse to seek interactions with the external world that promote psychological balance. There is the need for autonomy, competence, and the need for social belonging or affiliation. We will revisit these needs later on. Finally, we have implicit needs. These are unconscious motivations that can vary in awareness, depending on individual introspection, and are acquired rather than innate, meaning they are integrated into the cultural and social environment in which each person grows up. Examples of these include the need for achievement or power. In implicit motivation, individuals seek particular emotions or feelings. For instance, a strong drive for achievement typically results in high interest, joy, and pride when facing challenging tasks. Conversely, a low drive for achievement often leads to negative emotions like anxiety, shame, and embarrassment in similar situations. Individuals with a strong implicit drive for achievement emotionally need to tackle challenges as these situations trigger emotional patterns ingrained since childhood. Personal experience and socialization teach us to anticipate more positive emotional experiences in certain contexts, guiding us to align our lifestyle with activities related to these specific areas. Over time, and through repeated emotional experiences, we develop preferences for certain situations, hobbies, or career paths that align with our acquired implicit needs. Some prefer challenges and excellence, need for achievement. Others value warm interactions, need for affiliation, while some are drawn to influencing others, need for power. To illustrate this, let's take the popular series Game of Thrones. Jon Snow is a fascinating character whose personal story and deep motivations are closely linked to his past. He is introduced as the illegitimate son of Eddard Stark, one of the most respected lords in the realm of Westeros. Raised at Winterfell Castle, the Stark family home, Jon experiences a contrasting childhood, marked both by his father's affection and the disdain of Catelyn Stark, Ned's wife, who sees him as the symbol of her husband's infidelity. Catelyn Stark's cold and constant presence creates an atmosphere of rejection around Jon. This mixed treatment of acceptance and repulsion instills in Jon a deep sense of insecurity and a longing for belonging and identity. Jon's struggle to find his place in the world is a central theme of his narrative arc. His status as a bastard places him in a precarious position within Westerosi society, where legitimacy and heritage are of paramount importance. Jon joins the Night's Watch, a brotherhood dedicated to protecting the realm from dangers beyond the Ice Wall, hoping to transcend his bastard status and forge an identity independent of his origins. At the Night's Watch, Jon finds a sense of belonging among other men who, for various reasons, have also been marginalized by society. As we've previously seen in this podcast, psychological imbalance leads to the deployment of defense mechanisms to compensate for it. The invisible barrier of his legitimacy sets Jon Snow apart, creating a void of belonging he seeks to fill by constantly striving to be accepted by his peers. In contrast, Cersei Lannister embodies a totally different dynamic. Rather than a search for belonging, it's a burning desire for power and control that motivates Cersei, another iconic figure in the Game of Thrones universe. Faced from a young age with a world where power is often synonymous with masculinity and where women are reduced to mere pawns in political machinations, Cersei develops a ruthless ambition. She refuses to conform to traditional expectations imposed on women, aiming to carve out a significant place for herself in a male-dominated hierarchy. This ambition is amplified by a threatening prophecy received in her youth, foretelling a future where she would lose everything dear to her. This grim prediction fuels her paranoia and strengthens her determination to control her fate and maintain her grip on power at all costs. The terror of seeing these predictions come true becomes the main driver of her actions, pushing her to unimaginable extremes to thwart fate. Thus, while Jon Snow and Cersei Lannister may seem opposed at first glance, their journeys reveal that they are subjected to their respective implicit needs and cannot escape them. Fiction stories aside, we've seen three fundamental types of needs: physiological, psychological, and implicit. Now, let's turn our focus to psychological needs. Imagine a walk in a quiet park at sunrise. You encounter a child focused on building a pebble tower along a path. Sitting cross-legged, he carefully chews each stone, seeking the perfect balance between shape and weight. His concentration is complete. Each stone added is a test of patience and precision. When a stone balances, a subtle smile lights up his face, a sign of silent satisfaction. At every failure, he shows neither anger nor discouragement, but instead a strengthened resolve and an adjustment of his method. He starts with broad, stable bases before daring to construct more audacious towers, each stone challenging gravity a bit more. This simple activity is a deep source of engagement for the child. In this park, away from their usual toys, he finds a unique opportunity to test his dexterity, patience, and creativity. Every new attempt is a personal challenge. What if I tried this? And every success, a victory over the laws of nature. The theory of psychological needs is based on the premise that we are naturally active beings in constant growth. From childhood, we manipulate, explore, and question our surroundings. This curiosity doesn't diminish with age. As adults, we explore, play, and dive into various activities, from games to reading, from visiting friends to building projects. These actions, driven by intrinsic interest and pleasure, reflect our natural state of constant activity. The pleasure felt during an activity signals the satisfaction of our psychological needs. This satisfaction generates a specific interest and enjoyment in the task, motivating our engagement. Thus, actions like playing, solving mysteries, or facing challenges are inherently rewarding because they directly involve and satisfy these fundamental psychological needs. The principle of psychological needs highlights the importance of certain essential nutrients and environmental supports necessary for human development and well-being. The validation of these needs is evident in two ways. The provision of these nutrients leads to growth and well-being, while their absence results in decline and distress. This concept emphasizes the universality of these needs, embedded in our nervous system and common to all, regardless of age, gender, culture, or socioeconomic status. Among these needs is the need for autonomy. Autonomy is the need to feel free to direct our actions and to approve of ourselves in our choices and behaviors. Personal approval translates into a true agreement with oneself, asking, "Did I choose this? Does this behavior represent me? Am I in harmony with my choices, goals, and actions?" When the environment nourishes and fulfills the need for autonomy, we speak of autonomy-supportive influences. Conversely, if the environment neglects, represses, or directly opposes this need, they are considered controlling. We then speak of controlling motivation. These are motivational styles found in different situations, such as teaching, management, or parenting. An autonomy-supportive motivational style is defined by an interpersonal tone of understanding. For example, observing an autonomy-supportive teacher, one can see, hear, and feel the teacher's attitude towards the student. "I am your ally. I am on your side. I am here to understand you. I am here to support you." The image is somewhat caricatured. A teacher may not speak like this, but the idea is what matters. On the other hand, a controlling motivational style is manifested by interpersonal pressure. In the behavior of a controlling teacher, this attitude is discerned. "I command. I am the boss. I encourage you to follow directives. I will change you, and am here to socialize you." Some practical advice will be given during the podcasts. Here are a few tips to support someone's autonomy. First and foremost, it's a mindset that needs to be embraced and cultivated. To encourage another's autonomy, it is essential to put oneself in their shoes, to listen without judgment, and to inquire about their thoughts, desires, and needs from an empathetic viewpoint. Avoid controlling remarks like, "I don't care if you're tired, finish the work by noon or else," and instead say, "I understand that you're tired. How could we organize your work so that you can finish before noon? Do you need support or a break to feel better and be more productive?" Since a picture is worth 1,000 words, here is a small illustration of a story about supporting autonomy. In a peaceful little village, there lived a young girl named Leah who was passionate about gardening. She dreamed of turning the small garden behind her house into a magnificent vegetable patch. Her father, noticing her interest, offered his help.
"Leah, I've seen that you really enjoy gardening. How could I assist you in making your vegetable garden project a reality?"
He asked her. He encouraged her to research the types of plants she wanted to grow and offered her a choice of tools to use, valuing her decisions and autonomy in the project. Next door to Leah lived Maxime, a boy interested in painting, but his older brother had a very different view of creativity.
"Painting leads nowhere. You'd be better off spending your time studying than indulging in these fantasies,"
his brother often told him, without trying to understand Maxime's interest or encouraging his autonomy in pursuing his passion. Thanks to her father's support, Leah managed to create a beautiful garden, reflecting her determination and the autonomy her father encouraged. Maxime, on the other hand, ended up painting in secret, his creative spirit stifled by a lack of support. Now that we've nailed down the importance of autonomy, let's talk about the need for competence. Competence is a core psychological need. It reflects our universal urge for effectiveness and mastery in our dealings with the environment. It's about our drive to expand our abilities and rise to challenges, fueling our commitment to personal growth and the mastery of new skills. When we're up against challenges, we're driven to conquer them, which brings satisfaction. Watching the young man in the park, patiently stacking stones and delighting in his progress, is a perfect illustration of how the experience of competence captivates us. Every day, everyone meets challenges. In school, teachers lay exams before students. At work, projects and tasks test a person's writing and creative chops. On the drive home, the freeway challenges our patience and driving skills. If the car breaks down, our auto repair skills are put to the test, and so on. For someone to fully express their competence, it's critical that the challenges they face are matched to their skill level. If a challenge is too overwhelming, when skill level is low and the challenge is high, it can spawn a fear of falling short. Facing too steep a challenge can threaten our sense of competence, stirring anxiety or even dread, depending on the severity of the imbalance. On the flip side, when the challenge level is well matched to a person's skills, when both are sufficiently high, it fosters greater focus, deeper engagement, and an increase in pleasure. When the balance between the two is just right, that's what we call being in the flow state, a zone of concentration involving a loss of the sense of time and deep immersion in an activity. Let's illustrate this. In a small company, 3 employees have very different experiences with new projects. Alice, the graphic designer, is overwhelmed. Alice has just been tasked with creating a user interface for an advanced augmented reality app. Although skilled in graphic design, she has no experience with AR projects. The technical complexity and high expectations are causing her considerable anxiety. Each meeting leaves her with more questions than answers, fearful that she won't measure up. She feels perpetually on edge, teetering between worry and anxiety, as the challenge seems to far outpace her current skills. Bob, the web developer, is bored. Bob has been assigned to the maintenance of existing websites, a task he's mastered over the years. Initially, he enjoyed troubleshooting and optimizing performance, but such challenges have become scarce. Now his days are filled with minor tweaks, far from stimulating his desire to learn and excel. He watches the clock, his mind wandering far from his work. The current projects no longer stretch his developed skills, plunging him into deep boredom. Claire, the marketing expert, is in her flow state. Claire has recently been charged with leading a launch campaign for a new product, a project that perfectly aligns with her communication strategy skills and passion for innovation. Each day brings challenges, but none insurmountable. She is fully engaged, her ideas flowing and crystallizing into coherent strategies. Hours pass without notice, as she is completely absorbed in her work. For Clary, each problem is a chance to learn and shine. She is experiencing flow, where her skills are fully leveraged and challenged in a balanced way, giving her a sense of accomplishment and joy. Just as we can support a person's autonomy with an open and non-controlling attitude, we can also satisfy the need for competence by creating a structure to meet this need. 3 essential components characterize a well-structured learning environment: clear expectations, tailored guidance, and relevant feedback. Clear expectations are vital because when people start engaging in a learning activity, they often wonder, what should I do? What constitutes a good performance? What's the bar for quality? The inherent confusion in these questions can be dispelled by communicating clear expectations and/or goals to strive for. By conveying clear expectations, people understand what is expected of them, what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. Follow-through and guided orientation are also necessary by accompanying these individuals throughout. Finally, feedback is critical. When individuals demonstrate their skills and complete projects, they often ask themselves, did I succeed? What steps should I consider now? And how can I go from good to great? Constructive feedback is crucial for allowing individuals to refine and adjust their methods and performance, thus charting a clear path to future improvement. Without post-performance feedback, assessing the quality of their accomplishments becomes a challenge. Was my performance up to par? Am I heading in the wrong direction? Through post-performance feedback, the mentor assesses the quality of work, highlights strengths and areas for improvement, points out weaknesses and opportunities for growth, and offers advice for progress. An excellent illustration of these principles is found in the series The Bear, which tells the adventure of Kami, a talented chef taking over a family restaurant in Chicago after a starred career in gastronomy. Inheriting a disorganized team and a struggling establishment, Kami embarks on the daunting task of revitalizing the restaurant while managing the personal and professional challenges that come with it. But I won't say more to avoid spoiling the series for you. So we have covered the needs for autonomy and competence. Now let's delve into the need for relatedness. Relatedness is the psychological need to establish close emotional bonds and attachments with others, reflecting the desire to be emotionally connected and involved in warm relationships. The primary condition that involves the relatedness need is social interaction. Alone, this need remains relatively quiet. Social interaction awakens the need for relatedness. However, not all relationships nurture our need for relatedness. A casual conversation in an elevator will quickly be forgotten. On the other hand, a meaningful conversation where one feels understood by their partner leads to relationship satisfaction, as does a well-structured cooperative learning group, such as a university group project. The specific relational mechanism that best satisfies this need is what researchers refer to as partner responsiveness. Responsiveness begins with a person revealing something important about themselves. The interaction partner then offers a supportive response, leading the person to believe that the partner is responsive. 3 key characteristics have been identified in the process of a supportive response that supports the need for relatedness. First, understanding. The partner gets the facts right about what one is saying, feeling, and wanting. Second, validation. The partner values and appreciates what is said without judgment. And finally, caring. The partner sends a message of confidence that help will be provided when needed, indicating concern for well-being. This moment of sharing, where partners remain responsive to what is being said, leads to great relationship satisfaction. Partners in this dynamic often exhibit positive emotionality, good mood, trust, and engagement in the relationship. People who feel lonely do not necessarily suffer from a lack of social interactions. What they lack are deep and intimate connections. In other words, when it comes to feeling connected, what truly matters is the quality of relationships rather than quantity. Even though marriages are supposed to be close bonds, they do not always provide emotional closeness. In some cases, Despite an active social life within the couple, marriages can be sources of disputes, stress, and criticism, making partners' lives more complicated than they should be. The same applies to the relationship between young people and their parents. To illustrate an approach that fosters the need for relatedness, let's listen to an exchange between a student and a teacher. The student asks the teacher,
"I'm a bit lost with the climate project. I'm not sure where to start."
and the teacher responds,
I understand it can be overwhelming. Let's discuss your ideas and see how we can structure your project together. I'm here to help you. How about we meet after class to talk about what interests you most in this topic?
On the other hand, here is the reverse exchange. The student asks,
"I'm a bit lost with the climate project. I'm not sure where to start."
and the teacher responds,
Just follow the guidelines given in class. Everyone has the same information and needs to figure it out. Make sure you read the manual and do your research.
In conclusion regarding needs, we have explored 3 fundamental psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Supporting these needs is not only beneficial for individuals we seek to motivate, it also benefits those who motivate them, as it generates significant engagement among those motivated. This engagement is manifested by active participation in the proposed activity, whether in an educational context or coaching or management setting. Fully engaged individuals demonstrate better performance. They pay more attention to tasks, exert more effort, experience more enjoyment, show creativity, and contribute constructively to ongoing activities. It is essential not to feel guilty if one identifies with a certain way of acting. Rather, the goal is to understand what scientific psychology teaches us about needs and motivation. Psychology is a science that evolves according to each era's paradigms. Here we rely on the organismic postulate that every being naturally grows and develops both physiologically and psychologically. It is up to each individual to delve deeper into these concepts and decide whether or not to apply them to their own life. Imagine a music teacher who sets up a reward system to encourage their students to practice their instruments. Students who practice regularly and show significant improvement receive recognition badges and opportunities for solo performances at school concerts, motivating them to practice more. Consider another scenario where a tech company launches an innovation program that rewards employees who propose innovative ideas with bonuses, extra days off, or trips. In most situations, certain actions are seen as good and others as bad. The good actions are often rewarded, and the bad ones punished. For example, in driving, following the rules can be rewarded or at least not punished, while ignoring them can lead to fines or the annoyance of other drivers. Thus, we're guided by the desire for rewards and the fear of punishment. Incentives are elements in our environment that motivate us either to undertake or avoid certain actions. They are the signals that precede our behaviors, setting up expectations of either positive or negative outcomes. For instance, a smile or the smell of a delicious meal can draw us closer, while a grimace or a foul smell can have the opposite effect. The power of these incentives lies in our past experiences. A particular sound, like that of a car, may only trigger fear if, in the past, it has been associated with imminent danger. Similarly, our reaction to someone's presence depends on our previous interactions with them, whether they've treated us with contempt or kindness. This learning process, or conditioning, thus directs our behavior towards either attraction or avoidance, based on the incentive perceived as positive or negative. This is referred to as behavior reinforcement. There are positive reinforcers, negative reinforcers, and punishers, each playing a distinct role in how behaviors are encouraged or discouraged. Positive reinforcers are environmental stimuli that, when introduced, increase the likelihood that the desired behavior will be repeated in the future. This category includes concrete examples like receiving praise after expressing gratitude, getting a paycheck after a 40-hour work week, or being awarded a trophy after improving athletic skills. The effectiveness of positive reinforcers lies in their ability to increase the frequency of beneficial behaviors, making them more likely to recur. Negative reinforcers, on the other hand, involve the removal of an aversive or annoying stimulus, which also leads to an increase in the probability of a behavior. Unlike positive reinforcers, which add something pleasant to the environment. Negative reinforcers remove something unpleasant. For example, turning off the annoying sound of an alarm clock serves as negative reinforcement for the behavior of getting up in the morning. Punishers, meanwhile, make a behavior less likely by adding something unpleasant after the behavior. For example, criticizing someone, issuing a fine, or imprisoning are ways to convey that certain actions, like dressing inappropriately, stealing, or behaving poorly socially, are not acceptable. Unlike reinforcers, which seek to increase good behaviors, the goal of punishers is to stop bad behaviors by making them unpleasant. Understanding the difference between negative reinforcers and punishers can seem complicated since both involve the use of unpleasant elements. However, what primarily distinguishes them is their goal. Negative reinforcers aim to promote a positive behavior by removing an unpleasant stimulus. In contrast, punishers aim to discourage a negative behavior by associating it with an unpleasant consequence. Take the example of a child doing homework. If their parents turn off a loud noise in the house each time they start working, it's a negative reinforcer. The resulting quiet encourages the child to study. If, on the other hand, the child does not study and is subsequently deprived of playtime, this deprivation is a punisher. The unpleasant prospect of losing playtime aims to stop their neglectful behavior towards their homework. The widespread use of punishers to correct undesirable behavior is a common practice in our society. Whether it's through criticism, disapproving looks, the withdrawal of privileges, or even corporal punishment, such as spanking, the intention is often to immediately stop the unwanted action. However, although this approach may seem effective in the short term for achieving compliance, research shows it's far from the most effective in terms of long-term motivation. Indeed, punishment tends to produce more profound and lasting negative repercussions than the simple behavioral changes sought. The side effects of punishment, especially concerning corporal punishment like spanking, are particularly concerning. Research indicates that far from solving behavioral problems, physical punishment can lead to an increase in aggression, antisocial behavior, mental health issues in the child, and even damage the relationship between the child and the parent or punisher. Even more serious, these children are more likely to repeat these negative behaviors in adulthood, leading through social mimicry to a cycle of violence and suffering. These findings raise a fundamental question about the effectiveness of punishment as an educational tool. In the case of managing someone else's undesirable behavior, there's wisdom in the old adage, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." Punishment is a reparative strategy. What works is prevention, and prevention works best when the request to stop the undesirable behavior is offered in the context of a supportive, nurturing, and high-quality relationship, where the message is not,
"Stop it, you're getting on my nerves,"
but rather,
I care about you and I'm concerned about your well-being. I'd like us to work together to find the right solutions to help you live better.
let's take a closer look at some preventive techniques. Techniques that are particularly applicable to the educational context of schools, but that can also be extended to other settings. Let's start with differential reinforcement, which is based on the idea that individuals are more likely to repeat behaviors that are reinforced or rewarded, and less likely to continue those that are not. Unlike traditional disciplinary methods, where negative behavior is punished by the adult, differential reinforcement takes a more constructive approach. Instead of directly discouraging the child's negative behavior, it focuses on encouraging positive actions. By removing the reinforcement for undesirable behaviors, they tend to naturally fade away, leaving room for sustained behavioral improvement. In other words, when we stop rewarding or paying attention to behaviors we want to discourage, those behaviors tend to become less frequent or disappear over time. In practice, this means that instead of actively responding to undesirable behavior with reprimands or sanctions, it is deliberately ignored. This lack of response removes the power of the undesirable behavior to attract attention or receive a reward, thereby reducing its frequency. Thus, without reinforcement, undesirable behaviors gradually lose their appeal or function for the individual, leading to a natural reduction in these actions. at the same time actively reinforcing desirable behaviors with rewards or positive attention encourages their repetition. This dynamic promotes a transition to a set of more positive behaviors. In another vein, we have preventive tutoring or coaching, which involves anticipating and preventing academic difficulties before they take root. Specifically, students who show early signs of difficulty in a particular area, such as maths, are identified early, paving the way for rapid and targeted intervention. These students benefit from regular, structured tutoring sessions for intensive learning moments focused on specific goals and tailored to address identified gaps. Finally, with ongoing personalized feedback, each student receives the attention necessary to tailor instruction to their specific needs. Another preventive strategy is observational learning. It's based on the principle that we can learn by observing the actions of others and the consequences of those actions. For a teacher in the classroom, this means adopting a posture and attitude that they themselves would like to see in their pupils. The teacher acts as a model whose actions and reactions are observed and potentially imitated by the pupils. This requires the teacher to be aware of his or her own actions and to create a learning environment in which positive behaviors are not only demonstrated but also reinforced, thus promoting the acquisition of knowledge and skills through imitation. By adopting these preventive strategies, we shift the perspective from punisher to reinforcer. This shift creates an environment conducive to communication, mutual understanding, and respect. More importantly, it helps to develop vital skills such as problem-solving, emotional management, and empathy, which are essential for personal and social development. We've reached the end of this podcast, where we're going to discuss the concepts of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Some of you may have heard these terms before, as they have become part of our common lexicon. I've talked at length about psychological needs because they speak directly to the issue of motivation. In fact, the expression of the satisfaction of psychological needs is what we call intrinsic motivation. This manifests when our desire to act comes from within, fueled by nutrients that satisfy autonomy, competence, and relatedness, regardless of any external reward. People can be motivated in two ways, either by promoting extrinsic motivation, offering incentives and interesting consequences to induce the desired behavior, as we've seen before, or by favoring an approach based on intrinsic motivation, in which one responds to basic psychological needs. This involves creating an environment where individuals feel a sense of freedom, consistent with our notion of autonomy discussed earlier, while at the same time feeling competent and making meaningful connections with others. The advantage of one over the other lies in long-term engagement with the activity, and one might think that it would always be preferable to foster intrinsic motivation, but it's not always easy. In a world dominated by time and money, it's not always possible to motivate solely by satisfying natural and innate needs. So how do we balance these two forms of motivation? What happens to our intrinsic motivation, the force that drives us to act for pleasure or interest, when we mix in extrinsic rewards like money or prizes? Let's imagine a young person who is passionate about reading. Intuitively, one might think that rewarding their passion with money would increase their desire to read even more. However, research shows that this isn't the case. Surprisingly, adding an external reward to an already enjoyed activity can actually reduce future interest in that activity. This is known as the hidden cost of extrinsic motivation. When rewards come into play, the individual's goals shift from learning and mastery to simply acquiring the reward. This phenomenon can even alter self-determination, leading to a reliance on external rewards. But let's be nuanced, because not all rewards have the same effect. Material rewards, such as money, prizes, or food, are more likely to divert intrinsic motivation, whereas verbal rewards, such as compliments, generally do not. To continue our discussion, it's important to emphasize that the use of extrinsic motivators is not inherently harmful or counterproductive. Aware of this, researchers are exploring ways to integrate rewards that can mitigate their negative effects. They are turning to unexpected and primarily verbal rewards and avoiding those that are predictable and material. This subtlety in the application of rewards is crucial. It suggests that, in some contexts, rewards can be delivered in ways that support rather than inhibit motivation. One particularly interesting approach is to reserve the use of extrinsic rewards for tasks that, while not captivating, have significant social or educational importance. This strategy could transform otherwise monotonous activities into opportunities for engagement and achievement. The question then arises, do extrinsic motivations harm engagement in tasks that are inherently uninteresting? Studies suggest that when intrinsic interest in a task is low or non-existent, the introduction of an external reward does not risk diminishing the already absent intrinsic motivation. This observation is crucial. It suggests that the potentially negative effects of extrinsic rewards are primarily a concern for intrinsically motivating activities. For tasks that are considered less interesting, the effect of extrinsic rewards is neutral. They do not reduce intrinsic motivation because there was little to begin with. This nuance provides valuable insight into how we can structure learning and work environments. It encourages the judicious use of rewards, tailored to the type of task and existing level of intrinsic motivation, to maximize engagement and productivity without compromising the natural pleasure and interest we find in certain activities. We could go on and on about this topic, as it's vast, but I think this is dense enough for a first shot at motivation. Feel free to delve deeper into the topic with the references provided below. In conclusion, our exploration of motivation through its history, psychological underpinnings, and the various needs that underlie it leads us to a deeper understanding of what drives us to act. Far from being a one-dimensional concept, motivation is rooted in a mosaic of physiological, psychological, and implicit needs, each of which plays a critical role in our quest for well-being and fulfillment. Our journey through time has shown us that human motivation evolves with scientific discoveries, from instinct to will to drives, before becoming more complex with the emergence of basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. These needs are the soil from which our intrinsic motivation grows, that internal force that animates us without the need for external reward. But in a world where extrinsic incentives abound, we've been exploring how to balance these two forms of motivation. The goal is not to choose between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, but to understand how they can coexist harmoniously, enriching our experiences and constructively guiding our actions. Motivation is the engine that drives our actions, the breath that animates our ambitions and dreams. Understanding its mechanisms opens the door to greater self-awareness and understanding of others, allowing us to navigate life with a more accurate compass. I leave this reflection to you, listeners. How can you nourish these basic needs in your own life? How can you balance your motivations to pursue your passions, projects, and relationships in an authentic and satisfying way? The answer to these questions is a personal quest, an endless journey to understand what truly motivates us. As we continue this journey together, I'm open to your suggestions for topics you'd like us to explore in future podcasts. Your input is invaluable in shaping our content. Thanks for taking part in this podcast. May this be the beginning of an inner dialogue about your motivations and how they shape your path. We look forward to welcoming you back in our next episode as we continue to delve into the mysteries of human psychology.